Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be able to be back with you today to speak about these issues, and I'm pleased about that, not because we have to deal with these issues, but because it's very heartening that there's a crowd of people who care enough to be energized and come together and pray and fellowship to be prepared to fight these issues. It's what the Christian community must do. So I just thank you for your time here today, and it's an honor to be able to maybe give you some food for thought. I was asked to give a very specific type of talk today by Linda, and I've really been praying about how to give that talk. And it's funny how God works, because He puts the right things in front of you at the right time to bring things together. So I hope today's comments and reflections will be somewhat beneficial for you. As I've shared with you in previous conversations in this venue, one of the things I like to do to stay kind of up to date with what's going on in the culture of death and also in pro-life circles is I very much try to stay active in reading literature from Planned Parenthood. I don't ever subscribe to their mailing lists lest my name appear on anything. That would be really scandalous. But you can get a lot off the internet, and I'm sure many of you do the same thing as well. It's really very important to see how they're marketing the culture of death. And it's just a fascinating reality because they are marketing the culture of death just like a brand new car or cosmetics or good food. They are trying to peddle it in a way that is just appealing and seemingly life-giving, isn't that ironic, to the people who might be partakers of the culture of death. And so within the last month or so, I was out there on my iPad looking for different things, and I was Googling actually for donors to Planned Parenthood. I wanted to see who really funds Planned Parenthood. And you know, it's surprising. You'll just find people that maybe you can recognize in a strange sort of way, some names that come to mind, people who support other ventures that you might enjoy, also then support things that we're against. But one of the things I stumbled across, much greater perhaps than just learning the names and the types of people who fund such a bizarre thing as the culture of death, was I came across some donor literature that Planned Parenthood of California had prepared for its largest donors. And this is just like any literature you'd receive if you support a university or a favorite charity. It was a beautifully laid out document. It was very celebratory. All the wonderful things they had done to kind of further the cause of women's rights and unburden people of unwanted children and these sorts of things. It was all done with all the savvy and beauty that a professional advertising firm could bring. And one of the things that they did is they had letters from women and men, to some extent, who had terminated pregnancies, received abortions, just writing about how magnificent a choice this was. And it was just the same type of letters you'd see from an alumnus of a major university stating what a quality education they got from this university or that university. And so very, very just insidious in that way. One of these letters, and it's really, what I'm about to share with you is appalling, so please just brace yourself, really got me thinking in a direction that I'd like to talk about today. It was from a family. They had conceived a child. It was their second child. And they found out early on in the pregnancy that the child would have abnormalities and deformities. And they went on to say that, of course, the only choice at that point was to terminate the pregnancy. And what really just made my skin crawl was that they made some statement along the lines of this. We had no choice but to terminate our little Peanut. And then they went on to say that Peanut was the nickname that the older sister had given her younger sister. But it was really the most humane thing to do, given the challenges she would face. And you know, it just appalls me that someone can actually believe that's the case. And it appalls me that Planned Parenthood could take something so evil and wicked and turn it into something that's so celebratory, so magnificent. And what I've come to realize, and perhaps this is the whole thesis of what I'm here to share with you today, is that they have co-opted suffering, something that they really are a purveyor of. Planned Parenthood causes more suffering in this world than any other entity, I'm convinced, since the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler. Planned Parenthood has co-opted suffering, something that they have no business trying to counsel people around, and are using it to peddle their wicked goods. They're using it to peddle abortion and contraception and a lot of other things that aren't particularly life-giving for people, that causes them many years down the road to feel very just lost and forsaken, and to have a sense that their life has been irreversibly destroyed by something which is supposed to have been such a life-giving choice. Of course, it's never a life-giving choice. And so what I'd like to talk with you about today, because I believe gathered here today we're largely the Christian faithful, is that we, more than anyone else, understand suffering, and understand how people are to cope with suffering, and we have the answer for suffering. We have the only answer for suffering. It's always Jesus Christ. Suffering may be hurled at us by the powers of hell, and suffering may come from our own free will choices. Suffering, no doubt, is a result of the fall of man and original sin. But no earthly measure can ever unburden us from our suffering. And you see, as these issues go forward, whether it's a child who might have deformities or challenges, or whether it's an elderly person or a terminally ill person who doesn't want to voice their suffering upon their family or friends, who doesn't want to go through their suffering any longer than they have to, the culture of death is co-opting that moment and saying, you're right, you're a real problem, you have no hope in your future, you really have no answer, there's nothing that can help you. And they certainly veil Jesus Christ at every step of the way. And they say, so it would really just be best for you to eliminate the suffering. Eliminate your future child. Eliminate your life. You don't want to go through life dealing with challenges. End your life so your children can have a larger inheritance, or your spouse can go on in greater comfort. It's something that they've done to say that they are going to take suffering and give the answer. What they're peddling is darkness, and what they're peddling is death. So what I'd like to do today, because I take this very personally, is to share with you about a life where there was objective suffering, and then tell you about the reality. I'm going to do something that I really don't do all that often. I talk about it in bits and pieces, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own personal journey into this world and to this point today. I was born the fourth of 5 children in a very happy, comfortable Catholic family. My parents at the time I was born were fairly affluent. My father had a business, it was very good. We had excellent insurance. And they were very happy to have a 4th child, very happy to have a 2nd son. My parents thought the world was just magnificent. Everything was great until I was 14 months old. And I was diagnosed with a terminal cancer called neuroblastoma stage 4. Now at that time, I was just really very affected. I quit crawling and even beginning to walk, had quit doing anything of that sort. I was just very sedentary. It was the first symptoms my parents saw in their suspicion that something had gone wrong. By the time they got me to the best doctors in Colorado at that point, the advice they were given was not immoral advice, it was reasonable advice they could have taken, was to simply take me home and put me on comfort care and let me die rather peacefully. Having a child with stage 4 terminal cancer, that's a very reasonable thing to have offered. It wasn't a simple action. They could have chosen it and it would have been fine. But my parents decided to take an alternate route. My parents decided to treat my cancer. They used very aggressive treatment. They sought out the best care they could find. They invested a great deal of personal time and money. They invested a great deal of their efforts and endeavors that took them away from running a business and the family they had and their plans and goals and hopes that they had for grand vacations and fun realities for the family and others. And they invested all that into me as a young child of 14 months old. And I'll tell you, this went on until I was 4 years and 9 months, perhaps, when they finally were able to hear the wonderful news that I was in remission. And by the time I was 5, my parents had a child who was free of cancer and had a brand new baby girl. My sister and I were kind of both born into healthy life at the same time. Now, that being said, the fight against my childhood cancer was really very trying for my parents. And I don't think that they would argue with that if they were here. It was something that my older siblings had to endure as well. And there were other realities. The treatment I endured as a child for that cancer was very aggressive, sometimes experimental. And in addition to being very costly and very time-consuming, it also caused me to have different problems throughout my life. My spine is very much deformed because of a lot of the things that I went through, radiation and chemotherapy, shaped a bit like a question mark. I lean to one side, the leaning pastor of Fort Collins. At the age of 12 or 13, I had a terrible blood disease. I had autoimmune hemolytic anemia. We have no idea how it manifested. Maybe I'm just lucky that way, but likely it was a secondary encounter from some of the treatment I had as a child. When I was 19 years old and off at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, I had a blood pressure reading of 210/114. And at that time, we discovered that the treatment for my childhood cancer had caused a secondary renal cancer. I ended up having to have 90% of my left kidney removed and 10% of my right kidney removed. I went on to have a second surgery of that same nature in 2003, having more of my kidneys removed, and in 2006, I discovered that I had a degenerative kidney disease, also caused by my childhood treatment, called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Now that's a mouthful. It was almost as burdensome to get the diagnosis as it was to pronounce it. Now, all of this led to an eventual reality of kidney failure. All of this led to kidney failure. I ended up having to receive a kidney transplant from a classmate and colleague of mine from a seminary. I went through the kidney transplant and did very well. They removed my native cancer-ridden kidneys in 2010, shortly after the transplant. And I did fairly well with that until about a year ago when we discovered that that cancer that was on the kidneys came back and has grown back and amassed by my liver and my pancreas. I stand before you today with a very precarious cancer that I began spending a great deal of time and money to deal with. Now, I will tell you, on paper, that sounds pretty awful, doesn't it? It sounds awful, and it sounds expensive, and it sounds time-consuming. It sounds like it took a lot of time away from 3 older children who deserve to have their parents both money and resources and their time and affection. But I'm here to tell you today, as a person who objectively on paper has known suffering, that I don't think I've suffered much at all. I've had a joyful and happy life, and I'm only 36 years old. And I'll tell you, I've had to live a lot longer. And I'll tell you this, my parents had a joyful and happy life with all 5 of their children. And my 3 older siblings and I are very close. There, on paper, is a lot of arguments one can postulate or make on why I was a burden or a bother, or why I would have been best left to die peacefully as a 14-month-old child, or why my parents should have just simply given up the ghost at some point, or why I should have simply said, you know, all this is too much, maybe it's best I end it all. But do you know the joy that would have been forsaken in my own life and the life of my family and friends? Do you understand that when you eliminate one out of a family of 5, that there's a hole that can be replaced? And here's another reality. It's occurred to me that though I've known illness and I've struggled with illness, I've never seen it as a burden. Now, it's inconvenient, but I've never seen it as a burden that's destroyed my life. In fact, I will tell you, it's given context to my life. And I think I'm a very different person today, and I'm the man that I am today because I've been able to work through these challenges. I've come to know some amazing people through these challenges. I've witnessed tremendous love and support through these challenges. And I think that's really made me able to minister towards others in a way that's very compassionate and applicable. I will dare say, and I'm really going out on a limb here, but I think it's correct, I'm actually grateful for the challenges I've come through because of who they made me as the person I am before you today. And so I tell you these things as someone who can speak with a certain authority to the face of the culture of death. It angers me when people try to call out suffering and say, you want no part of that, or you can't deal with that, or that's a burden for others. You know, I stand here today as a man who has completed a full course of studies, both in college and gone on to receive a master's degree. I've been a priest for 7 years. I've ministered to countless people. Who says that my life has less value because I had to calculate in some challenges that other people didn't? It's nobody's business to say that to me or to anyone else. And so the reality is, dear brothers and sisters, we have to take back suffering and put it in a Christian context. We have to rip the understanding of suffering out of the culture of death's hands because they're simply saying it shouldn't be dealt with and we should get rid of it. Well, I'm here to tell you today, you'll always have suffering in your life. As unique as I might sound, I'm a little bit of everyone in this room. And you know someone else like me, or you suffered like me. And you understand that suffering will come, as will joy and triumph. We'll accomplish great things. We'll deal with difficult burdens. All of these things will come together to form what we call a typical life. And when we embrace these things, especially as people of faith, and when we have a deep and founded faith that Jesus Christ walks with us in these things, nothing is insurmountable. Even the greatest tragedies can lead to some of the deepest and most poignant moments and even joys in our life. Every crucifixion comes before a resurrection. And so I tell you that because we should be the people who speak with authenticity to men and women who suffer. To the woman who's scared to death what she'll do with this unplanned pregnancy. We have an answer for that suffering. We can hold her pain, and we can listen with compassion, and we can offer reasonable answers. And the greatest thing we need to offer her is that she can either mourn the loss of that child after she's terminated the pregnancy, or she can glory in the fact that what seems so difficult and insurmountable is now a great joy, a dynamic human being, someone who's given context and depth to her life. We can stand with the terminally ill person and say, even in your challenges, even if you should die because of these things are not meant to destroy you. In fact, with Jesus Christ, these things can become very poignant moments of intimacy with Jesus on the cross. Sometimes when we struggle with illness, I can tell you personally, we see the Lord's love more completely. We should be the people who stand and witness to the terminally ill that ending their life is not the answer, but making the most of their life in Christ while they have these challenges is certainly where the Lord invites us to be. And we should stand with the elderly who are told you're a burden and you're unwanted and you have no value here, and say you are full of value because of the wisdom of years. And it's all we can do to say thank you for the contribution you've made to this world, to love you and care for you when you're least able to do that for yourself. These are the things that we do as the pro-life Christian community. This is not dynamic, it's not strange or interesting, it's nothing new at all. It's simply loving after the mind and heart of Jesus Christ. And as somebody who has been loved in that way, as someone who can stand before you today, giving this little fervorino for life, I can tell you I've done it because people like yourself have been with me along this tremendous journey and let me stand here with great confidence and comfort and love. I know the love of Christ, and I've met him in each and every one of you. And so this is who we have to be for other people. We must take back this argument from the culture of death. We must truly show that Christians know how to suffer well, and that our brand of suffering doesn't lead to death of innocent people, but leads to everlasting life in Christ. Amen. And so this is what I have to share with you today. And I hope it's what I can send you forth this week and month as we go through this 40 days of life. We must be people of hope and joy. We must proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we must live it in our thoughts, words, and actions. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you again today. May God bless your endeavors.